This is the hour, the Steven Hour, and we are back with another 007 movie review. And today we'll be reviewing 2008's Quantum of Solace. This is Daniel Craig's second Bond film. Now, before we get into the cast, before we get into the plot, let's get to a bit of background. Now, in 2006, Casino Royale was released, receiving a huge hit at the box office and critical praise, completely rebooting the timeline. One thing you should always give credit for Craig's era as Bond, whether you're a fan of the films or not, or whether you feel they worked or not, I personally agree that the one thing they did was they were taking full advantage of essentially rebooting and essentially having the character be, evolved further. And as a result, Quantum of Solace was to literally be a direct sequel to Casino Royale. And something like that had never really been done in the series before. The timeline was always either loose, there would be hints of certain films connecting with each other. Honestly, I think the really proper direct sequel film they should have done was when they did On Her Majesty's, and this direct sequel, Diamonds, should have been a direct continuation of the events of that film. But as we know from my previous reviews, that didn't happen. The series went in a completely different direction. And Quantum, the name is actually derived from an Ian Fleming short story. And this film was plagued with a lot, and I do mean a lot, of problems behind the scenes. Just about when they were developing a script, there was an infamous writer's strike. So they had to kind of make up the, rewrite a lot of scenes as they were filming them. So I think that kind of never helped matters when filming. And of course, just like what they did, they got a completely new director to direct the film. The director was Mark Forstner, who was known for being more artsy with his films. Daniel Craig, of course, was still Bond, and essentially this film was to continue with the storyline of how that film Casino left off, to continue further exploring some of the loose ends that were in that film. So, the question remains, how good is this film? Is it any good? Without further ado, let's head straight into the cast. Of course, Daniel Craig is back as Bond, and honestly, I absolutely, despite what I'll admit, there'll be a lot of flaws, I think I'll be doing a lot of nitpicking as we go further on in this review, but I genuinely liked his performance here. And again, Daniel Craig for me, was perfect casted for this film. He may not look like Bond, he has blonde hair, but I really feel that he really gave us a unique interpretation. However, I will admit, I feel like the kind of recycling, again, he's supposed to be evolving, but it's almost like he's still the same from Casino. I don't know. That's just, I have to point that out. We have the character of Camila Montez, portrayed by Olga Kolinko, probably butchering that name, and she's essentially the Bond girl, and she's given a very interesting story here to be developed with this film, and it just goes, and she's essentially this former spy on a sort of revenge thing, and Bond on his personal revenge intertwines with her. So we got that nice thing. We have Gemma Tinton portraying Strawberry Fields, an MI6 agent, and honestly, very forgettable, and has one of the most weirdest names for a Bond girl, must admit. Here we have our main villain, Mathine Amelik, portraying the character of Dominic Green. Honestly, one of the most forgettable and often considered maybe one of the worst villains in the series. And I think it's because he's just unforgettable, he's too slimy, I don't know. He doesn't gel well with me, and I honestly quite forget him. And let's not forget his henchman, Elvis. And he's portrayed by Anatol Tubman. Again, butchering that name. He's so forgettable as a henchman. He doesn't even look like an actual henchman or even any intimidating threat. We have, of course, Mr. White brought back here to for the film. He was introduced in Casino. I like how they brought him back. still being portrayed by the same man that portrayed him in Casino, and is essentially, and of course the actor who portrayed him is Jesper Christensen, and and even though he sadly has very limited screen time in this film, but I feel like despite that, he does at least give a bit of a memorable performance, and I really wish he could have either been the main villain or the henchman of the film. I just felt that he should have been really more invested in the really be more in the story. We also have a secondary villain, exiled general, who was portrayed by the character's name is General Madrado, and he's portrayed by Joaquin Colso. He's basically a general that's been exiled and is in league with Green, and both are kind of working together to achieve both of their own ends. Of course, we have M, still portrayed by Judi Dench. I love how they brought her back, and also Felix Leiter is brought back, still being portrayed by Jeffrey Wright, still portrayed, and I like how he's almost on the fence of being both good and bad. Something I find very different here, and makes him rather interesting. They also brought in his, we also here have Mathis Mac back, portrayed by this, Giancarlo Gino. Bond's out, and Bond is reluctant to go back to him, to work after the events of Casino, and I like that. We also here have CIA Section Chief Greg Beam by David Harbour, and essentially is Felix's boss, and the two have a kind of shaky alliance, as Felix is kind of doesn't like how he's working with him. I like how they've done that. Also here is the proper introduction to Bill Tanner, portrayed by Roy Kinnear, M's aide, and is seen as that for the majority of Craig's tenure. And out of all the actors to play him, he's honestly definitely made a stamp on the role, and is arguably, if not one of the most standout and most interesting characters of the film, and even of the Craig era. It's just something about her that just stood out to me. I absolutely like what they've done. Other minor characters, including, we also have the character of Mitchell, portrayed by Glenn Foster, M's bodyguard, and Yosefo, portrayed by Simon Cascasas, essentially Vesperlin's former boyfriend, and is revealed to have a bit of a role, especially in the latter half of the story. With the cast out of the way and a very, very bad reading of it, let's get into the film. We begin our film, once again, not with the gun barrel. For a lot of the earlier Craig Bond films, they don't do that. But at least the first one made sense. This one kind of feels a little out of place. But don't dwell on that as we quickly jump into some action. I like how the action is built slowly, with two of these cars with Bond's cars coming out of the shadow, and these two villain cars coming out of the shadow, only to result in a high-speed chase, with them two trying to essentially shoot down Bond's car. Bond, of course, manages to yet escape and destroy the two cars, and ends up at an MI6 safe house, and it's revealed that in the back of his boot is Mr. White. And it leads to a nice little line, "Time to get out." Now, I will admit, I like the action scene. My problem, and this is going to plague for the rest of the film, the constant editing. It is too over the top and out there. It's hard to keep track with what you're watching. Even though, and I do like with some of the stuff they do, one of Bond's car doors gets ripped off, is badly damaged, and it leads to a nice good shoot-off scene, but it's just so over the top and out there, it's hard to keep track. So automatically, I'm both interested, but also heavily rolling my eyes, trying to figure out what on earth is going on. And honestly, for some of these scenes, you constantly kind of have to rewatch it on a repeat viewing, just to find out what on earth is going on. But let's not dwell on that. Let's get to the opening credits, or opening title sequence, where for the first time ever in the series, the song is a duet The song No Way to Die, Another Way to Die is sung by Jack White and Alicia Keys. Now, this song is not really liked amongst the fandom. Me, personally, I don't hate the song. I genuinely find it okay. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. The visual aesthetics are fine, but I also feel kind of bland too. I don't know. I always have mixed feelings when it comes to this one. Eventually, Bond makes his way to M, where it turns M's here along with her bodyguard Mitchell. And eventually they investigate, and eventually Bond brings him up to date with the death of Vesper's lover, who is revealed to be dead. However, M has done investigating work and thinks that the dead body that is supposed to be the dead lover is not actually the dead lover, but is a fake. How it was believed that his face was so messed up, it destroyed the face. And it's showing that Bond is slightly cold-hearted towards the death of Vesper, but it's still showing deep down he still cares. Just when M looks away, he quickly takes a picture of her, just as he's drinking down essentially a glass of, I'm guessing, scotch. Whilst this is all happening, there is a sort of race being taken place. Bond and M sit next to White and try to interrogate him to find out more about the organization. I admit, White must be the most underutilized character of the Craig era. He is just so fantastic in this one scene. He steals the show for me and grabs my attention, more so than Judi Dench and even Craig, which is a shame because those two actors are phenomenal. But Mr. White character is stealing the show. Eventually, but I like the final line he says within the scene. The first thing you need to know about us is that we have people everywhere. He puts his head up and says, "Am I right?" When Mitchell takes out his gun and shoots one of the bodyguards, Bond quickly gets into action and gets into a struggle with Mitchell. Mitchell ends up shooting White, I guess, in the arm or the shoulder, and M makes a run for it. Just as Bond gets his head back up, he sees Mitchell escapes and goes after him, seeing the most likely source of information about this whole organization. Now, I like the chase. It goes underground, eventually up into the races, and then eventually on a rooftop chase. Eventually leads to a church bell, where eventually the two get into a standoff and fall, thanks to this really good camera work shot, fall through a glass roof, and essentially are fighting. I like the choreography. I feel it's working pretty well. And eventually it leads to Bond finally getting his gun and shooting. Now, a few things you need to know. One, the editing, again, it's just messing with the overall action scene. I just can't get my head around. It's just not that good. Also, it feels like Bond should have evolved to not kill, on-site thing. He should instead try to prevent it, but hey, it happened. Instead, he shoots him point blank when he could have wounded him. Also, Bond is using a Walther PPK. He's no longer using the updated version of the Walther that he got in Tomorrow Never Dies, and have been using them in the subsequent films since then. He's gone back to his classic Walther PPK, and so far he's still using it to this, currently in the film series. Eventually he makes his... And, yeah, that's the things you need to know. He eventually makes his way back to the MI6 safe house, where he knows Mr. White is left. He returns back to London, where M and everyone is investigating Mitchell's apartment for possible clues. I like how Judi Dench picks up a present that she had personally bought for Mitchell, showing just how much of a close relationship they had. Like a Christmas present, showing up how personal the relationship was. But she is curious on how he killed him when they could have learned something, as they are still in the dark about the secret organization. Mr. White has made his escape, and Mitchell is now dead, and they don't know who's, what to do. Eventually go back to the proper MI6 headquarters, where they manage to find out that Mitchell's contact is a guy named Slater, Edmund Slater, and lives in essentially a rundown hotel in Hades, and they managed to find out courtesy of the money that he's been paid, which was being laundered through there. Even though it's a nice little investigation scene, how the camera work is, how the touching on the screen feels off. Also, but this scene should also be known for being the first proper appearance of Bill Tanner, and honestly, throughout the Craig era, Bill Tanner has more of an influence than not only did in his only 2 appearances in the Roger Moore era, and even arguably his proper 2 appearance in the Pierce Brosnan era. Bill Tanner becomes a main fixture in the Craig era, and will continue to reappear in the subsequent films post-Quantum. Eventually, Bond makes his way to the motel where he gets into a fight with Slater and ends up killing him. And when people claim that the Craig era is influenced by the Bourne films, with Casino Royale, yeah, but they have a bit of the Bond element. But here, it's too Bourne for me. And I agree, they're definitely too heavily influenced. Don't get me wrong, Bond films are always influenced by what's popular of their time, but they still manage to retain what makes Bond Bond. So I agree with them on that. Just as he makes his leave and does some investigating around the hotel, he eventually learns that Slater was a hitman and is sent to kill Camille Motors on the and I like how he doesn't know. He's trying to pretend to be him, eventually realizes what he was meant to do, quickly makes his escape, and out of the car just as she drives off. He then finds out that there's a person that's been following her. He then knocks the guy out and takes his bike. Craig is absolutely great in that. He gets a call from M where he reveals that, Slater was a dead end, and Bond and M realized that Bond killed him. Eventually, it's revealed that the reason why she left is because the killer, Slater, was hired to kill her. Of course, Slater's dead, and the person that hired him was Dominic Green, this film's main villain. And of course, we see Elvis, the henchman of the film. My problem, again, I've established why I don't like these 2 in my top 10 Bond villains. If you want to know more about that, go and watch that video. Just as that's happening, Bond makes his way over there and is lurking behind the scenes, observing what is happening. And we also see Green meet with an exiled general named Medrano, and the 2 are helping each other to come to essentially their own personal goals, with him to overthrow some kind of government, become the new president in exchange for a place of the desert that Green has to offer. It's also revealed that Carmilla has a bit of an interest in the guy and the general, and kind of wonders what's going on here. Just as they leave by boat, Bond makes his way onto the boat, and this is boat chase. He rescues her, and this is cool boat chase, I guess, and it would have been great, but the editing, again, makes me feel underwhelmed with the sequence. It really should have been fun and fantastic, but doesn't work. Bond eventually, of course, makes his escape with her when she's knocked out, makes his way to, I guess, I don't know where, and hands her off to some guy, and says, basically that she's seasick. I don't know, I get a crack out of that. He eventually steals a car and drives off, and gets contact by M where Green is. Green is, where he'll be, and more about Green's background. M also ends up getting in contact with the CIA to investigate more about Green, where they find out their section chief of South America area, Greg Beam, to ask more, and they said no, they're not investigating. We also find out that Beam is also there with another agent, Felix Leiter, returning from Casino Royale and still being betrayed by the same actor. I like they did that. And it seems the 2 have struck a deal with Green for a profitable business arrangement. But they also know that Bond's around, and with the help of them, they agreed to get rid of Bond for them. But it's clear that Felix doesn't really like what's going on. It's clear that the director is calling the shots, or is forcing all the shots to be made, and he doesn't like what's being done here. I like how, again, he's more portrayed in the story and given more about the character. Green is eventually rise at some opera performance, where Bond eventually gate crashes and, goes undercover there, dressed in a tuxedo. I like how the scene is built up, and it shows us how large the organization is. They are literally watching an opera, and we get to see how many. Bond makes his way, after he stole a sort of hidden earphone, earphone, to secretly watch the organization. I like how it's kind of cut. And, again, it's opera. It has a bit of class, or a bit more secretive, but they would do something like this. Eventually, Bond gets their attention by telling them there's somewhere to meet, and everyone gets up and makes their leave, when Bond secretly photos them all and sends them to Bill. Mr. White is to Bill Tanner. Mr. White is also there, but he's smart enough not to get up, just takes his earphone off and just tells the woman next to him, well, this opera is not for everyone. I like that. I don't know. And say that's the last time we'll see White, as we won't see him back until Spectre, which is a real shame, because I really liked his character. In fact, I liked him more than Green. Anyway, just as Green, Elvis, and essentially the rest of the henchmen make their escape, Bond ends up meeting them, and essentially the two of the henchmen chase after Bond, resulting in a shootout. And again, the scene should be good, but the editing, I don't know, I felt something was missing. I understand what they were going for, but I just felt it just didn't work quite right. Eventually, Bond ends up pointing his gun at a special branch bodyguard working for a Quantum member, Guy Haynes, who happens to be an advisor to the British PM, and as Bond's asking who he works for, he essentially pushes him off a roof, but he tends to survive. Green sees this and has him killed and drives off. And this results in M assuming that Bond did this, and it's clear, and as a result, it's clear Bond needs to be reined in. He's too reckless, and when he won't listen, she revokes his passports and tries to limit his movements. But of course, that's not going to stop it. As a result, Bond heads to Tullamore and meets up with his old ally, Mathis, who turns out to have been innocent after the events of Casino Royale. So no matter how desperate he is, he has to go to him for help. And the two agreed to go to Bolivia to see where Green is going. And we get this nice scene which shows that Bond is still saddened by the death of Vesper, and it shows that even though what he tries to tell, the death of Vesper still has not left his mind. They also, and as they get there, they end up running into a field agent, Strawberry Fields, who essentially is there to bring Bond back to the UK immediately. But Bond doesn't. He manages to... First, they go to Fields' hotel of choice. And it's then revealed, but of course he doesn't like it, then they go to this more classy one, and then he seduces her. And they attend a fundraising party that Green happens to be holding. Mathis is also there. Bond once again runs into Camilla, and manages to rescue her from Green. And eventually makes their leave. Whilst also there, Mathis also introduces him to the the head of the Bolivian police. Police there, and will kind of play a bit of a role later. Just as Bond and Camilla are leaving, they end up getting pulled over by the police, and essentially orders them to open up their boot of the car, where it's revealed to be Mathis. One of the policemen shoots Mathis before Bond kills both of them, and Mathis sadly dies in his arms, urging him to forgive Vesper and himself. And Bond then shows his cold side when he throws the lifeless body of Mathis in the dumpster, takes his money, and walk off. People don't like this, but I kind of do. It shows us how cold reality Bond is. This then gets back to M, and eventually M has a meeting with I guess the PM, and essentially Bond has to be brought in immediately, more than ever now. Bond and Carmela make their way to an airfield where they take a plane and fly off, where they then get chased up by some fighter pilots. They then end up jumping out of the plane, skydiving, and landing in essentially some kind of, I guess, sinkhole, where they discover that Quantum has been secretly damming Bolivia's water supply of water to create a monopoly. And essentially, we get to see just how it's like doing to this poor town. It's really, and I find it's almost cruel. Again, when you think they're after oil, they're not. They're after water. It's a more realistic villain plot, but still at the same time, not that really interesting. Eventually, they both Carmilla and Bond make their way back to the sort of hotel they were at before, but Bond comes face to face with M, and they learned that Quantum had killed Field by drowning her in a crude of oil. And essentially, Bond has his license kind of revoked. He's kicked out of this, almost kind of, and is sort of arrested. And is taken into an elevator by some thugs. He beats him up. Again, the camera work, not so well. Just the same with the airplane fight. The camera work and editing just don't work well for me. But I really like the last little gag as he gets out and kicks one of the, I guess, bodyguards' legs back on the elevator and meets up with M and basically, you know, just forwards everything with her. But she says that's pretty much a killer dragnet out on him. And he says, well, I wonder who would have told us that. And by that, he's won M's trust again, and essentially has Tanner to go and help by giving him information. As a result of that, Bond quickly meets up with Felix to get more information, and when it was told the CIA planned to take up Bond, this is the chance they got it. And Bond manages to escape with the help of Felix, who warns him, and he and Carmilla then head their way to a hotel out in the middle of nowhere. And it's showing where the general is, along with the chief of police, I guess, where they meet. To meet with Dominic Green and a few of his men to make a deal. And essentially Green has Madra into signing the contract that will make him the leader of Bolivia in exchange for the land rights, making Green Bolivia's sole water provider at significantly higher rates. Bond and Carmilla, make their way to the hotel, and a nice fight starts. Bond gets a nice killing that starts it, fires everywhere, and Carmilla faces off against the Bolivian general, and Bond fights Green. I like the fights. It's okay, but it's not perfect. And honestly, the editing doesn't really bother me that much here, and something I've noticed, all the fight scenes happen to incorporate some kind of element. Fire, water, air, and land. Some of the big action set pieces tend to involve that. I kind of like it, but I really wish it wasn't really, but I don't know, the editing just doesn't work. Eventually, Carmilla ends up killing Madrina, avenging essentially her family's murder. It's revealed that her backstory was that the general was responsible for the death of her family. But both her and Bond struggled to leave the facility courtesy of it being on fire. Bond managed to, but Green manages to get away, and I like the scene where he hit this gunshot. Bond looks, and Green says, "It sounds like he just lost another one." I think a nice little reference to Vespa, and I like how, Bond's face is. He quickly gets to Carmilla, and with the fire, is giving her some PTSD, revealing hints to maybe that's what caused the death of her family. And just when Bond's comforting her, he then shoots some kind of canister that causes the wall to explode, and it results in them getting out. He sees Green running in the desert. He manages to catch up to Green and takes him further out into the desert and interrogates him about Quantum. Bond leaves him stranded in the desert with a can of engine oil, pretty much knowing that, that if that's not going to kill him, his organization will, because he's ratted them out. Just as that's happening, Bond drops Carmilla off at some, I guess, town, and they share a kiss. I like how the dynamic, the Bond girl and the Craig eras are different. Like, it's not the classic lovey-dovey we usually get, but it's more of an equal, and I like the little kiss here. Again, they don't go with the usual bang the girl at the end of the film. Again, which makes sense, because Bond's still getting over Vespa, and that wouldn't have worked. and basically wishes him luck on conquering his demons. Bond then travels to some place in Russia where he finds Vesper's former lover, Yosef Cabrera, who turns out to have been a member of Quantum. Turns out his role was to seduce women agents with valuable connections and essentially, help them progress with their organization. And turns out is indirectly responsible for her death. After saving his newest target, who reveals to be some, I think, Canadian agent, MI6 come in, and Bond reveals to them he did not kill him. Something that we were all shocked. It turns out he finally got over it. It turns out we also find out that Green was found dead in the middle of the desert, shot twice in the neck, with some engine oil found in his stomach. Courtesy of probably that's how desperate he was for a drink, I guess. And Bond gives a little smirk. I give a little crack out of that. M then tells Bond that she needs him back, and he responds that he never left. He then walks away and drops Vesper's necklace in the snow behind, signaling he has finally gotten over Vesper. And the film ends there with a gun barrel. And I will admit, it kind of caught me off guard. When there should be a nice romantic moment, it happens like that. And that's how we end the film. Quantum is often considered one of the worst films in the series, and if you see my ranking of all the films, I ranked it at the bottom of the barrel. I considered it the worst film, and for quite a while, I hated it. I would only watch it if I was doing a big Bond marathon. However, how do I personally feel about the film now? If you're judging by how I was reviewing, you can definitely say I'm not as angry about it or hate it as I normally would. But this film has its share of problems, courtesy of the writer's strike, the editing too over the place. It's not colorful or appealing, it's too brown. And honestly, most of the characters here are quite forgettable and completely unmemorable. But are there some good stuff? Well, yeah. I generally like the opening, despite the bad camera work, bad editing. I can understand the story that we wanted to go. It made sense that Bond would have not fully... Bond wanting to avenge Vesper, and I understand that moments would have shone, but it's almost felt like he was still completely de-evolutionized of what he was in the first, still repeating what he did in the first one when he should have been evolved further from the film. It also should be noted, because I just remembered this, at the end of the film, it's revealed that the guy that ran the CIA in the film was arrested, and Felix still kept his job, and essentially on still good terms with Felix. Again, I just want to mention that's out of the way. Craig is a still fantastic performance. Despite the flaws of this film, we can all agree he's arguably one of the most few redeeming moments of the film. And honestly, this film should also be heavily guilty of copying too much of the Bond film. And honestly, it should have gone further in developing Bond to be more closer to the character we know. But they didn't go with that. Also, I felt that Quantum was just a complete misstep. It should have been established that there should be a far bigger and more powering organization. Again, they were kind of meant to be the modern version of Spectre. Again, the series couldn't use Spectre at the time, so instead they came up with Quantum. I don't know, this film just felt like it missed several beats. And I don't know what's to blame for that. The writer's strike, maybe the director, or maybe people just hoping it'd be a big success. Of course, the film would be a success, like it always would. But, I don't know, it's just disappointing that this film followed, arguably, one of the best Bond films of the series, and we got this. But at least I can give credit to this than what Diamonds did, was at least it followed the storyline set up from the previous film. Diamonds didn't do that, but what Diamonds has over this is it feels like an actual Bond film. I don't know, this is definitely one of the weakest, and I consider it maybe possibly the worst film of the series, but I can admit, you can get some enjoyment out of it, but you have to be in a really lazy mood, or when you're marathoning, or you're doing a Bond marathon, you watch it. It's really just, for me, a very disappointing Bond film, and I'm sorry, but that's how I personally feel about it. There we have it, that was Quantum of Solace. Released in 2008, it proved to be a big hit at the box office, but critically didn't do well. After that, the films would still be going through a sort of hiatus again, and the next film will not be released until 2012's Skyfall. and that'll be the next film we're reviewing. So until then, this has been the Steven Hour, and ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching, and so long for now.